Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible, hosted by Lawrence.
Yep, today it's hosted by me. And we have our usual panel. We have Aaron, Isaac, Ember, and Mark. And I don't know who that Peter guy is, but he's around in the ether somewhere.
He's around,
yeah,
but
Tomer is hiding on us.
Tomer just
yeah.
ran.
Well, I don't know where he went. But I think, Aaron, you are going to love part of today's reading. Once we get to, I'm not even going to tell you which part, because you will know. You will know the part that I am thinking of right now, because you know me. So I think you're going to love this chapter that's coming up.
Brilliant.
There he is.
Right. Okay. Tomer, are you okay?
Yeah. My internet decided to disconnect right at the beginning of the show, and I that internet problem starting today. So
Well,
Okay.
whatever your internet issue is, we can kind of hear it.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's how do you describe that?
You're basically so can't all you're saying. That's about it. There we go.
He's got again.
Good time.
Peter, you exorcised him. Who knew Tomer was a demon this whole time?
I always suspected.
Yeah, right. We always knew you were.
I've
a demon,
refreshed.
Tomer.
Is it still awful?
Okay.
No.
No, it's better.
Yeah, good.
Oh, now you're okay.
Someone turned you off and on again.
Is it better now?
So who is reading today?
I can if nobody else wants to, or
You've already
have
read
you?
previously.
It's true.
I enjoy the sound of Ember's voice box.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's one way to phrase it. Okay, how many verses we got in this one?
25
Okay.
actually. In the
Is he
Hebrew
going
Bible,
all the
it's
way through?
26.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, because this is the one that starts earlier, I guess. Right. This is the one where verse 30 from before would be verse 1 from 23.
Yeah. So yeah, and the Hebrew Bible will start at verse 2. So.
Oh, right, because one would be the title verse kind of thing, or something like that.
Well, it's part of
it's just overlapping.
It's part of like the other chapter in a different tradition, right? So like it might get confusing depending on what you're citing, but like the verses still follow. Like they're still like the same verses in the same order, just they're numbered differently, which is kind of annoying. However, that is the case. It should be pretty easy to follow along, honestly. If you can read, that's great. If you can't, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we all doing our best out here. All right, so the whole thing, or?
Yeah, the whole thing.
All right.
Read up until I interrupt you.
No one who has been emasculated by crushing or cutting may enter the assembly of the Lord.
What
No
the
one-
fuck?
That's not even the verse I was thinking of, Aaron. There's a different one that you're gonna love. But yeah, this is the one where it's like nothing with no one without a blemish can enter the house of the Lord kind of thing. So
Yeah, I have the same translation here, I think. Where's it come from? That's a bit adding to the word. Seems like emasculated is not there at all.
see, mine is far better. No one whose testicles are crushed or whose penis is cut off shall come into the assembly of the Lord. Mine is far more clear.
Well, that's
I should get a
literally
better
word
version.
for word.
Yeah, this
like-
is the NIV, which was written by Puritans who can't talk about the naughty bits or something. Emasculated. No, if you don't have the correct number of nuts, you may not enter the tent and the holy spots and such.
Would it be safe to say that's kind of a polemic against the Egyptian priests who would castrate themselves?
I'm not sure.
I think. I mean, it's so entering an assembly of the Lord seems to be about marriage. rather than about service, like in the temple. So
Mhm.
I think it's more, if a man who is a eunuch cannot marry a Israelite woman or
Mhm.
whatever.
So it's
Mhm.
not just about like the tent of meeting or the temple or any of the holy sites. It's being part of the community, the congregation in general.
Yeah, I think that seems to be the classical interpretation of what this
Mhm.
chapter, like most of this chapters, or the beginning of this chapter, is talking about, and not entering into the assembly means not,
Which
cannot
is
marry.
weird because
Mhm.
we get the marriage stuff a little later. Once we get to verse,
Yeah,
or once we
this
get to
is
chapter
an
24.
injury, right? So you don't get to. I don't know what the purpose of worshiping a god is, but I mean, the believers think that there's a purpose to it. So if you have an
Oh.
injury, you can't do what your soul is damned now.
Oh, the thing is, it's not just an injury, right? Because people do this themselves in order to like harbor an ascetic lifestyle. Because in their worldview, if they became ascetics, if they gave up, very worldly pleasures, they would be rewarded later. So the idea here is people like eunuchs, right? So like Mark was saying, the Egyptian priests, and it wouldn't be specifically the Egyptian ones. I think other cultures in
Mhm.
the ancient Near East and Mesopotamian did it as well. So it would be, most other ones, but yeah, it may be not a polemic so much as a like, let's separate ourselves from those people.
Mhm.
And this is where Chris, he was part of a bit. Chris is our producer. So he was part of this video where his entire bit was, oh no, I've lost my dick and balls, and now what a shame he can't enter the temple. It was funnier in context, I
Mhm.
promise.
And not to
believe it.
mention that also, wasn't it the whole priesthood like an ancestral thing? Like you had to be son of,
Right, yeah, the
right?
Yeah.
part of the family line.
Yeah.
You okay, Tomer?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing.
Are you
My
in the
internet
bathroom?
is fuck. Can you please listen? I'm using my laptop, and I know the quality of my microphone is shit, but the internet right now is also shit. So you have to get used to it for the moment. But I also need to work some other stuff. Yeah, I know. It fucking sucks, but it is what it is.
Tomer, if your commentary is
I've
going
had
to be
literally
shit,
phone it in before.
Tomer, if your
Feel free to
commentary is going to be
bow
shit,
down to
then
the
It always is.
resolution to your logo.
if your commentary is going to be
The
shit,
game's a bit
you're
high.
going to have the trifecta.
Just a second. I don't know why my internet decided to like be this. Now my OneDrive doesn't want to work. I don't know why. This is a fucking disaster.
Well, listening to Tomer's tech support is really fascinating. Let's move
Oh,
on.
okay. Now I wait. I think I managed to work it.
All right. Well, we didn't even get to the whatever verse you said we should get to.
Oh, we were going to do the whole thing, but we managed one verse so far.
I do when I camp on
okay.
verse 3, though. I have something to say. That would be the only thing I could,
Maybe we should just do until like verse 9, and then we'll talk about it, and then continue again.
Yeah. Let me just rearrange stuff.
I like that idea. Verse 9. We should go there.
All right.
Yeah.
Continue.
In the meantime,
Alright.
we can have Arn read one of the comments, because that's a topic that we might need to address.
All right, Kicker White Lion offers 50 Czech kroner and says, "How's the war on Christmas going? I'm on the northern front. Santa keeps dropping presents on us. The elves are relentless. Cookies and milk are low."
Tough shit.
That's pretty cool.
Tomorrow.
Well, I mean, it's an ongoing thing. Like, I just got a fresh supply of coal, for example. I'm sure that will be helpful in creating incendiary devices to fend off the airborne reindeer.
Yeah, there was. I remember this one cartoon where the Santa is sitting on top of the chimney with his pants at his knees.
What you get, you little fuckers?
Yeah, I took advantage. I took advantage of the time of the year to go to Oxford when it's quiet, and it's still. I mean, it's still a lot of tourists, but like it's much quieter than it would be. Go in all the museums, no queues. Go in the schools when there's no students. Yeah, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, the library with no. I mean, I've never been, but I imagine it'd be constantly flooded with scholars and such.
Yes, it's
Yeah, the
much
library
quieter
looked
when
like
the
it
students have all gone off to their Muggle families.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Harry Potter filming locations are quite cool. Like you're walking around, you're like, I know this.
Yeah, I did the same thing in Northern Ireland. I was recognizing fields and such. You know, that's where they burned that girl. That anyway.
Good
Anyway.
to know. Good to know.
Yeah. You know that bridge where Arion, the rope bridge where Arion threw his father off? I've been on that bridge. That bridge is real.
Oh.
Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Verse 2.
No one born of a forbidden marriage, nor any of their descendants, may enter the assembly of the Lord, not even
Bastard.
in the 10th generation.
Because that's fair, right? So does that mean you're going to be damned again? That's what your parents did?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
One drop of
God
blood.
is a
That's her.
righteous judge, right? Completely unfair? That's what righteous means?
Oh, yes, and pay no attention to that verse in Ezekiel about the children not inheriting the sins of their parents. That's not applicable here. Yeah.
Ezekiel's always a fun one because he's like the he's a very standout prophet because he disagrees with other prophets quite a lot, and in fact there's this verse in Jeremiah. I think I'd have to find it, but Jeremiah claims that he's the only one that's the only current prophet. So at the time he's the only current prophet, but I'm pretty sure they were contemporaries, so that causes an issue. But I'd have to find the verse again. But either way,
it's going to take us a while to read through Ezekiel, by the way.
What to even get there? But Ezekiel's a lot of fun. There's a lot of really cool stuff in Ezekiel.
Here's what I want to say about verse 2 that just kind of jumps to mind here is, in Amber's version, what you read said forbidden, but I think it's more like an illicit union. Here's what's in view. Shall not be admitted to the assembly of the Lord. So then I think about Jesus. Was that an illicit union? I mean, let's be frank here. Because here's the thing.
I mean, are you referring to verse 2 in the on the Old Testament?
Yes.
So the Hebrew here is mamzer, and I have a comment on this. Well, the NIV uses born of a forbidden marriage, but the etymology is a bit odd. I mean, I think that traditionally it is read as bastard, as this the KJV and RSV do it, but it's but it seems like
so more or less the problem with the word bastard is that the word bastard in English, at least as far as I know, is developed to mean anyone born out of wedlock, and a mamzer is not someone that is born out of wedlock. It's only someone who was born from a forbidden marriage, which is why the NIV decided to choose that phrasing, because it's actually more accurate. Because at least in Jewish tradition, a mamzer is someone whose parents are related, or so it's rape or incest. It's pretty much what it's talking about. It's not talking about fornication. If your parents aren't married, that's not you're not a bastard. Like, so they're not. It's not a one-to-one translation. I think that's probably the
Yeah,
issue.
I have a comment on this, but I don't know where you are in the verse.
We just did 2. We're doing one verse at a time right now.
What a great pace! What a great pace!
Absolutely. We're
So-
very thorough today.
We should.
Yeah.
What
I
I
mean,
did
it's
want to
a
get
fair chapter for it.
agreeing with Tomer, we should first do the reading and then the commentary.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, on to 3.
No Ammonite or Moabite or any of their descendants may enter the assembly of the Lord, not even in the 10th generation. For they did not come to meet you with bread and water on your way when you came out of Egypt. And they hired Balaam, son of Beor, from Pethor in Aram Naharaim to pronounce a
Aram
curse upon you. Thank you.
I mean,
To pronounce-
Aaron also had that same problem. I remember.
You would.
To pronounce a curse on you. However, the Lord your God would not listen to Balaam, but turned the curse into a blessing for you, because the Lord your God loves you. Do not seek a treaty of friendship with them as long as you live. Do not despise an Edomite, for the Edomites are related to you. Do not despise an Egyptian, because you resided as foreigners in their country, as slaves, but still. The 3rd generation of children born to them may enter the assembly of the Lord. When you are encamped against your enemies, keep away from everything impure. If one of your men is unclean because of a nocturnal emission, he is to go outside the camp and stay there. But as evening approaches, he is to wash himself, and at sunset he may return to the camp. Designate a place outside the camp where you can go to relieve yourself. As part of your equipment, have something to dig with you when you relieve yourself. Dig a hole and cover up your excrement. For the Lord your God moves about in your camp to protect you and deliver your enemies to you. Your camp must be holy, so that he will not see among you anything indecent and turn away from you. He's very, very shy.
Yeah, you can't
If a
have the Lord
slave
step in your shit,
has
right?
It is an aroma not pleasing to the Lord.
Exactly.
If a slave has taken refuge with you, do not hand them over to their master. This will be important later when we eventually get to Paul. Let them live among you wherever they like and in whatever town they choose. Do not oppress them. No Israelite man or woman is to become a shrine prostitute. You must not bring the earnings of a female prostitute or of a male prostitute into the house of the Lord your God to pay any vow, because the Lord your God detests them both. Do not charge a fellow Israelite interest, whether on money or food or anything else that may earn interest. You may charge a foreigner interest, but not a fellow Israelite, so that the Lord your God may bless you in everything you put your hand to in the land you are entering to possess. If you make a vow to the Lord your God, and do not be slow to pay it, for the Lord your God will certainly demand it of you, and you will be guilty of sin. But if you refrain from making a vow, you will not be guilty. Whatever your lips utter, you must be sure to do, because you made your vow freely to the Lord your God with your own mouth.
I'm trying to make notes and only jump in later, but I mean, there's just too much.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Just finish
a lot of
finish
fun
the
stuff.
finish the
Timor.
final 2 verses, and then you can
Yeah.
rant whatever you do.
Okay. Speedrun. If you enter your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat all the grapes you want, but do not put anything in your basket. If you enter your neighbor's grain field, you may pick kernels with your hands, but you must not put a sickle to their standing grain. Fiend.
Okay.
Now you can rant.
Okay. So, I mean, first, I was a little surprised to hear that God doesn't like twinks. So he's got a thing against male prostitutes. I was also impressed that there is a thing about male prostitutes. Because
Yeah,
Those are not.
Yeah,
Those are not
it's
equal.
temple prostitutes.
It's
Twink,
quite
twink,
debated
twink,
if it
twinks do
is.
the same thing, but they don't charge money for it.
It is debated whether what is described here, the Kaddish or the Kaddisha, are
Yeah,
shrine prostitutes. I've heard some scholars who dispute this, but when it gets to that, but there's also the price of a dog in Hebrew. The KJV at least has price of a dog in Hebrew, Mechir Kelev, which is also an interesting like.
They use dog has been used as a derogatory for prostitutes usually.
Yeah, especially male prostitutes. But once I'll get to there, then yeah, it's gonna be fun.
I mean, to me, these sound like prohibitions against things that would be practiced by the Canaanite worshippers of Baal. You know, these temple priestesses were there for arousing Baal, you know, and thus, you know, fertilizing the land, whatever. So I think they're just trying to make some clear distinctions as to what we do and what we will not allow to do as we set ourselves apart. Like Lauren said, we do things differently.
And why is there a term of temple prostitute?
Because that was a very common thing in the ancient Near East. No, it was. Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So the idea is like, yeah, we're setting ourselves apart. Like, we are not like them. They are the other. We are something else. We are very, very special.
Which is interesting because the word
was. Go on.
The word used for prostitute, male, female prostitute in this verse is kaddish and kaddisha, which comes from the root to mean holy or to set apart. So they were set apart for the purpose of temple prostitution, let's say, or whatever. So because of the language used, it seems to be that this wasn't just. It's possible that it's not talking about just prostitution in general, but like temple prostitution, which is probably why temple prostitute was used as a translation, because it kind of implies that this is like a sacred.
I think it's a bit more nuanced than that, but once I get to my commentary, then.
And then we have this thing about it. This is the God not just of the Jewish people. This is the creator of not just this planet, but the entire cosmos, right? I mean, this is the uber galactic overlord. But he's got a thing against Ammonites and Lamanites and Edomites.
Well, aside
I don't
from
remember
the horrible ways that you, aside from the horrible ways
That's
that you
other book details.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because these are like ethnic distinctions, right? So this is again like trying to separate, but like they recognize like who is closer kin, right? Because they're like, oh, for these people it won't be up until the 10th generation, but for these other people it shouldn't be until the 3rd generation. So they still kind of see that genetic link between each other, that shared history, that shared ancestry, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, what do you do when you make a peace treaty with a nation that your holy books say are, you know, evil and should be killed or whatever? Here's a later version that says that they're related to us.
Ken Ham likes to argue that the Bible teaches that we're all one race. But then we get to the line about do not abhor any of the Edomites, for they are your kin. Just them. Ammonites and Lamanites and Watusi, they're not your kin. That's just, but the Edomites are.
But our end,
you have to specify which group of people are related to you.
Yeah,
but were you there?
Were you there? So because we have to also remember that the concept of kinship and family units were different, right? Because like now we can recognize that we all have common ancestors, but you know, at the time, their kinship, their unit of I guess not even like a family unit, but like their unit of family units had a cutoff point. Like in different places and different times, that would be a little bit different, and you could see this in how genealogies were often written. So, like, because I was recently studying Ireland, there were times in Ireland where they would track back to 6 generations and count that as your family unit. But then later on, they would only track back 3 generations to be your family unit. So the kinship concept is different than the kind of biological kinship that we talk about now.
Yeah. I remember when Madonna used to refer to penises as units, and you say that your unit has a cutoff point.
And
this chapter
we
is
know
talking
Yahweh
about
loves
cutting
cutoff
off your
points.
I have so many questions, but I'm not going to question
And
Remember
then-
that time
and
he
then-
almost killed Moses until
So-
his wife mutilated his child's dick? You know.
Yeah, I can't believe Madonna did that. That was crazy.
That's the New Testament.
You can't go to church if you had a wet dream.
Yeah, but see, the thing is,
You
for
can't even be in
that
the
one-
camp.
Yeah,
You have to
for
go
that
wait
one-
outside.
For that one, the reason why there's like this cleanliness process, and that's not just like an aversion to bodily fluids, which they've already shown, but it's also the fact that these nocturnal emissions were thought to be caused by demons, specifically Lilith demons. They were thought to visit men in the night and cause nocturnal emissions. So,
When
I mean,
I mean,
there
isn't
were.
that much later?
when Lilith
I mean, at
gets
least the
back, she's
naming
got a lot to
of
answer
using
for.
her.
Well, no. When I say Lilith
Mhm.
demons, I mean that because Lilith were a class of demons, like
Yeah,
Lilith
but-
demons. So
This
Mm.
this reminds
Speaking
me
of
this little
nocturnal
lady.
emissions, I do want to get back to the whole Jesus thing that I wanted to get at from verse 2, which seems
one
to
does.
highlight that there's something wrong with illegitimately conceived children and them fulfilling a purpose in the temple or temple grounds, right? Because they're not allowed in, it means you can't serve. So when I read Matthew 1, verse 19, it looks to me like Joseph really is aware that there's a problem with what's going on here with the Mary being conceived from someone other than him, because he's the one who betrothed Mary. So it reads in verse 19, her husband Joseph, being a righteous man and unwilling to expose her to public disgrace, which I don't think it's because he was like, he'd be gossiping and then it turned into a public thing, but because it's the legality of the matter would expose her as, you know, something's wrong with her. And so he resolved to do something different. And I understand the New Testament Gospels are trying to do something different with that. But if we stick to the Mosaic law and what this seems to be saying in verse 2 of Deuteronomy 23, then any involvement in the temple grounds, or, you know, what I would then consider the priestly office of Jesus, could be considered illegitimate from this perspective. If I'm reading it right, I don't know if you guys agree, but I don't know.
I saw one of those paintings of Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus, but baby Jesus is kind of like a little kid Jesus, and then
With
and
an
so they
adult
put word
face.
balloons on
yeah, with the there's a really weird period of art, I swear. Like it's so
it. So yeah, the little kid saying, "Mommy, where do babies come from?" And then Joseph says, "Yeah, Mary, where do babies come from?"
Yeah. I know that's funny.
I mean, with the story of Mary, I mean, if it got out that she had a child that wasn't Joseph's, then she would be accused of adultery and then stoned. I don't remember if it's stoning or
Yeah. And
or-
this reminds me of this whole thing about the nocturnal emissions. You can't come to church and all that. There was this little old lady in this 1800s dress. I mean, she's dressed like the old cowboy days, you know, the bonnet and all of that shit. And she showed up in this convenience store that I was working in many years ago, and she had these little like plastic transparent gloves. And I asked her what's up with the gloves, and she goes, "Well, anything that a man touches within 24 hours after the seed has gone out of his body is infected with the AIDS virus, don't you know?"
Hmm.
Oh, she also said it was unclean. That's what it So that's what that so within 24 hours after the seed has gone out of your body, you are unclean and must be removed from the camp.
Oh, I do want to say that the section from verse 9 is talking about like a camp, that's like going like a small group of soldiers or what, oh, not small, but like a, the army camp rather than the camp of the entire camp that we've been talking about till now. So because like these things like a nocturnal emission, a place to relieve yourself, all of these things, they didn't have to be outside the camp when they were in the desert, for example. It's only talking about like a military camp. And it's like practical things like,
that woman was getting gas at this gas station, and she came in to ask me about some additive in the gasoline, and I didn't know what the additive was or why she was asking about it. So I asked, why does this matter? And she said, because she said it was damaging to the soul, the Lord told me. And so I knew I had a live one right away. And she talked with me for a little bit, absolutely crazy, just like 3 o'clock in the morning somewhere. And then she finally said that why is she here is because the Lord spoke to her or spake to her and told her that she needed to go to this particular store, this in this particular town, and that the Circle K in Springerville, Arizona, and you will find the help that you need. And I said, lady, believe me, God did not send you to me. I said, are you sure he didn't mean the 7-Eleven down the street? And so she left. And then about a half hour later, the 7-Eleven down the street called me up and said, hey, did you send some crazy whacked out bitch down to our store?
She must have noticed that when you spill the petrol on the ground, like you see little rainbows, and she's like, they must be putting something in the gasoline to make the frogs gay.
Yeah. Or the sign of the covenant.
No, that is clearly a sign of God's covenant. There you go.
Yep. Okay, so are we ready to read on?
I have commentary.
Oh,
yes, he does.
Yeah.
I am shocked.
I'm sure we'll have lots more to talk about anyway.
Yeah, so a couple of things. First of all, I apologize for the audio quality. That's the circumstances. I need to check on my internet tomorrow. And second, again, because we have the this like Old Testament Hebrew Bible numbering, I'm going to say verse 1, which is verse 2. I'm referring to verse 1 in the Old Testament, which is verse 2 in the Hebrew Bible. So for Aaron, please be aware, okay? So we'll begin on verse 1, which is verse 2, about crushing. I'm using the NIV. Hebrew, it's patsua daka. The word daka is an adjective, is the adjective contrite or crushed, according to BDB Dictionary. According to Mishnah Yebamot 8.2, this refers to anyone who has at least one wounded testicle. Ibn Ezra notes that some grammarians say that it refers to, quote-unquote, the flesh, i.e. the flesh of the testicles, which is soft, since daka can mean soft. He writes, however, that this is far-fetched.
Yeah, I think it's there's two words, right? The first one means crushed. I don't think that's the problem, right?
Yeah. Patsua,
no,
daka,
patsua. Isn't the word patsua the one that means?
Patsua means like damaged, but it's
right. Yeah, like damaged, rather.
It designates a single thing, patsua daka. But
I think
yeah, go on.
Yes, I think he's saying that like it's saying damage. The grammarians are trying to say that the damage to the testicles by translating the second word directly to testicles,
daka.
Because the word daka can mean like soft, and
and
he's saying that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Rashi also says that these are testes that have bruised or crushed. So yeah. And on cutting, the Hebrew it's krut shofcha. The word shofcha is a haypax derived from the root shin pei chaf, to pour or spill, and so shofcha refers to the penis. And I like the BDB rendering fluid duct. And yeah, according to Mishnah Yevamot 8:2, this refers to anyone whose penis has been cut off. Rashi says, the organ was gashed and no longer ejects a stream of semen, but spills and dribbles and is sterile. But the Peshitta uses adulterer to describe both cases. And Cohen-Zemach proposed that verse 2 hints to the story of Noah's drunkenness, as seen in Genesis 9, verses 20 to 27.
Wait, what?
It,
Where
yeah,
did it?
yeah, because he showed his nakedness. Something this, I think it's a bit far-fetched, but I still include this because I thought it was a bit interesting. So.
Oh, you've moved on to verse 2. I was saying you jumped very quickly from
because
about...
it's verse 2 it's verse 1 in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
I used verse 2 in the Hebrew Bible, so
I'm saying where did you bring in adultery? What's that got to do with that verse?
Yeah, the Peshitta, it uses adultery to describe both cases of the cutting and crushing.
Oh.
Yeah, interesting.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, it uses what McCarthy calls an ignorance of lexical information. Yeah. So the assembly of the Lord. Lundbom writes that this term refers to an assembly of all free adult males in Israel, convening when necessary to hear Yahweh's word, as seen in Deuteronomy 5:22 and 9:10. Decide and fight wars in Judges 22 and 1 Samuel 17:47, and choose a king in 1 Kings 12:3, etc. Tigay cites several motivations for the prohibition. Castration was connected to idolatry, according to Driver and Nelson. The inability of the eunuch to give birth, according to Josephus in Antiquities 4290, Bechosho and Lutzato, or feelings of disgust over self-injury. He notes that since castration disqualifies priests from officiating and invalidates animals for sacrifice, Leviticus 22:24, such defects may have been considered incompatible with the holiness demanded of Israelites. On verse 2, which is verse 3, born of a forbidden marriage. The Hebrew, it's mamzer. The etymology of this word is unclear. BDB dictionary suggests deriving it from the root mem zain resh, be bad, foul, or corrupt. Rabbi Abahu, in Talmud Yerushalmi Kiddushin 3:12, derived it from mum zal, a strange defect. The Septuagint, Vulgate, and Targums Jonathan read, one born from a prostitute. And from that, bastard, found in KJV and RSV. According to the halacha, a mamzer refers to a person born from a forbidden sexual relationship, as seen in Maimonides' Mishneh Torah, Forbidden Intercourse 15:1. Tigay and Nelson support the latter interpretation. Cohen-Zemach proposed that this verse may reflect the origin of Canaan, son of Ham, in Genesis 9:22, since it may be hinted here that Ham had sexual relations with his mother, Noach's wife, and as a result, Canaan was born. Now, not even in the 10th generation. According to Sifrei Deuteronomy 2:48, since in verse 4 we see throughout all time, the reading of the 10th generation refers to any generation. We see the number 10 used to indicate a countless amount in the Bible, for example, in Genesis 31:7, Numbers 14:22, and Job 19:3. Septuagint omits this clause, probably due to homo eo teleuton. On verse 4, which is 5, for they did not come to meet you with bread and water. This clause is difficult, since according to 2 verses 28 to 29, the Moabites did provide the Israelites food and water. As for the Ammonites, it is told in 2:37 that the Israelites bypassed them, and there is no indication that the Israelites asked them for help. Nachmanides and Lundbom propose that this clause refers to the Ammonites, while the latter clause refers to the Moabites. They write that the silence regarding the Ammonites in 2:29 implies that they refused. Tigay notes two problems with this solution. One, it is an argument from silence, and two, as Abravanel noted, the first clause uses plural verbs, while the second uses a singular, and so it may indicate that the first clause refers to both peoples. Tigay writes that the verse may reflect a variant tradition about Israel's encounters in Transjordan, according to which Ammon and Moab were both asked for food and refused to give it. On verses 7 through 8, which is verse 8 to 9, Clement of Alexandria takes Egyptian here to mean Gentiles. And Rashi writes that the Egyptians received the Israelites during their time in need, i.e., when Joseph came down to Egypt. Nelson and Lundbom agree that this may be a reference to the Joseph story or traditions about the patriarchs. When it comes to Edom, Lundbom writes, the attitude expressed here toward Edom is early. Von Rad says, before Israel was a state. Edom was brought under Israelite control by David, as in 2 Samuel 8, 13-14. But this ended in the reign of Joram, circa 849 to 842, king of Judah, as in 2 Kings 8, 20-22. Before, and especially after, the fall of Jerusalem, Edom seized land on Israel's southern border. And because Edom aided in the destruction of Jerusalem, Israel developed a deep hatred towards its people, as in Psalms 1377, Ezekiel 25, verses 12-14, and Obadiah.
So I got it backwards. It was the other way around. So they first were okay with them, and then they started not liking them. I did have a question about verse 5. It says, God would not listen to Balaam, but turned the curse into a blessing for you. So I wonder if this is reflecting like an alternative tradition where instead of what we have, that Balaam blessed them instead of cursing them on his own sort of, I guess, almost like it was his own idea. Maybe there is a tradition where he did curse them and then God changed it to a blessing, because that seems
right. Because remember, we have good traditions about Balaam and bad traditions about Balaam. I remember we did cover that a lot.
Yeah, this one seems like a bad one. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Russia, I think he says like, he meant to curse them and then God made him bless them, something like that.
Imagine trying to like curse someone and then God being like, I'm going to turn this into a blessing, or like the other way around. Like, what's the point of even doing it if God can just?
I think there is an idea that he was like going to, and he just couldn't help himself, and he just started saying this blessing.
Okay.
You know, like yeah. All right, 6, 9. I mean.
So on verse 9, which is 10, everything impure. The Hebrew is davar ra. Rashi writes, as Satan incriminates in times of peril. This phrase appears in 17:1 in reference to a physical defect which renders an animal unacceptable for sacrifice. Here, the reference is to blemishes related to camp uncleanliness, as seen in the examples given in the next verses. Tigay comments, later sources construe this admonition broadly. The Qumran War Scroll, column 7, lines 4-6, excludes those with permanent bodily defects and defiling skin eruptions, and the Temple Scroll, 58:17, calls on the army to avoid all types of impurity, sexual crimes, and every type of sin and guilt. To the Sifrei Deuteronomy 254, the admonition refers to idolatry, murder, sexual immorality, blasphemy, and all other sins for which the Canaanites were expelled, and which would drive away God's presence. Nachmanides thinks that the warning includes these and all other forbidden actions, and that it is prompted by the fact that armies on campaign indulge in all kinds of unrestrained behavior that they would normally avoid. On verse 10, which is 11, nocturnal emission. The Hebrew is Mikra Laila, literally what happened at night or a night accident. This term is usually understood as a nocturnal emission from Kirei Laila. Nelson, however, writes that perhaps a more general range of improprieties that could occur under the cover of darkness is intended. Yes.
Yeah, there's an expression of someone who has had an emission. What is that called?
A disgrace.
wet dream.
No, I'm saying in Hebrew there's a way of saying a person who has had an nocturnal emission. They're called something, like a bal keri or something like that. Is that the word?
I don't know actually.
A horny motherfucker.
Yeah, I think
I'm gonna read a couple of comments.
So by the way, yeah.
So Matt White says, Aaron, how about a Christmas special where the panel takes apart religious themes in It's a Wonderful Life? Yeah, that sounds like it could be fun, but we didn't plan for it well in advance. Then Eric Wander says, verse 3 says that no Moabite may enter the assembly of the Lord. Yet David has the great grandson of Ruth, a Moabite woman. Any commentary on this?
Yeah. So I should have mentioned that. So yeah, the tradition that I think Tom also brought up, that's about marriage into the community, whatever. It's only talking about men marrying a Israelite woman. So if a Moabite woman or an Ammonite woman was to convert and marry an Israelite man, that wouldn't be going against this verse. At least according to the tradition that maybe change. We're like, oh, it can't be both, and because of that story. But yeah, the tradition actually says like, oh, it's not a problem. This was always only against men,
Yeah,
which is interesting
like
because
this.
the Moabites women were the ones who were apparently doing all the bad stuff.
Chapters like this are a good example of, when people say that if you want to become an atheist, just read the Bible.
Oh.
And then Alma Tadero says, R.N. Ross, since God says they have to blame people till the 10th generation, does that mean Christians are still guilty for the people killed in the witch trials of Salem?
Well, I mean, to be fair, this is talking about like entrance into the assembly, not
not necessarily cursed.
Sin. Yeah.
And I mean, the thing with the one born of forbidden marriage, like if someone is born from a forbidden marriage, he's a mamzer. He can't marry an Israelite woman. Well, actually, I think for mamzer it's both. They can't marry into the assembly at all. So if they have children, it must mean that they've had it with someone who's not in the assembly to begin with. So
there's another concept of mixed marriage that if an uber galactic overlord would not consider, he wouldn't care.
Yeah.
You're Semitic and you're Semitic light. Well, what the hell? Why? What does it matter? Because it's only small-minded people who think that the races should remain separate and not intermix.
I mean,
God, if there was a God, would not give a fuck.
You're gonna love Ezra and Nehemiah.
And anyone else heard that Freudian slip where Arn said the goober overlord?
No, it was a misspoke.
I thought it was a good one.
And then Eric Wander gifted one R and Raw membership, and then Anton Gomez offers 66.6 Mexican pesos and says, I missed Deuteronomy 18 when you guys crossed by the prophecy of Muhammad. I'm guessing nobody noticed. That's true, we didn't notice.
Because it wasn't a prophecy of Muhammad. But I'm sure that's
I did mention it. I did mention it. I
feel like we did bring it up.
Oh, yeah. Christians also try to associate it with Jesus. I think Augustine, and I don't know if it's original numbers. Never mind. But yeah, no, it doesn't.
Okay, and then the Atheist Carpenter says, are these verses considered to have anything to say about vasectomies, or do they just ignore that?
So this is probably where you get into like a lot of rabbinical law stuff, because like if the issue was just any kind of state of impurity, I guess, where there is like something wrong with your body, then I suppose vasectomy would fall under that category. But if we're going from the words on the page, either crushed testicles or a cut off dick, then no, because neither of those happen in vasectomies. So it kind of depends on who you ask.
Well, what if they sneeze during the process?
Yeah, I think that just gets into a different context, because I don't think vasectomies were practiced back then.
No, I don't think they were.
But certainly, whatever is visible, I think was a big deal, because public nudity was sort of part of culture. I did an episode where we covered circumcision, and in the Greco-Roman context of where this might have come from, or from within, or around this time, the big deal was not a big deal to be like exposed to penis, as long as it was uncircumcised, so the foreskin covered the glands. But when Jewish circumcision comes in the scene, where you're now exposing the glands, now it becomes like, ooh, what's that? That's immoral. So there's a clear tension that is there that's sort of like in the background of all this that I just find interesting.
It's funny. I agree, and it's funny seeing the comparison of prudish behavior here in the U.S. We have Republican congressmen going all ape shit because they want to criminalize public urination, right? As if that's a sex crime somehow. But when I was in Paris, you had to walk past the urinals to get to the ladies' room.
There are some buildings in London that have little like wooden slats sticking out them at an angle because there was too many people pissing on the building and they didn't want to ruin the stones, so they put little shields so that they would hit themselves.
In my old hometown, we have that
on the Victorian times.
On the church in the center of town that has those slabs as well.
Yeah. The churches especially like to have them.
Can't piss.
Yeah. Should have had it on the Alamo. That's what got. That's how.
Why are we talking about
kicked
this?
Out of Texas for a week.
This is very relevant to verse 13.
So Kip Davis, who could not be with us today, but is in the chat, thank you, says, I have a friend who wrote an interesting article about the pragmatic stipulation of the rules for combat purity in the War Scroll. He also discusses the extent to which people understood disabilities in an ancient Jewish context.
I would very much like to learn more about that.
Okay.
Post it in the Discord.
So American,
that's right. Post it in the Discord.
Yeah, I don't think he has a Discord. I don't know. Okay, on verse 12, which is 13, a place. The Hebrew it's yad, which means hand. The early translations, Rashi and Ibn Ezra, understood this word as a designated place. Nelson notes that this word could also denote marker or a sign, i.e. a sign designating the proper place, as seen in 1 Samuel 15:12, 2 Samuel 8:3, and 1 Chronicles 18:3.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the expression in Hebrew, the yad is used to mean like, you could say the hand of a place is the place next to it, which is.
Yeah, you also have like places like Yad Mordechai, which use yad to designate a place. So.
Hand. Yeah. I think it's very common to say like, oh, I'm next to it. You say liyad, like to the hand of this thing, means to the side of, to that next to it.
Yeah. Okay, so on verse 13, which is 14, I'm using the KJV here. A paddle. In Hebrew, it's yated. The word generally means peg or pin, according to BDB Dictionary. Specifically, a tent peg, as seen in Judges 4:21. Lundbom writes that such a tool can be double duty for digging a hole in the ground.
Oh.
Now,
But there's going to be a different double duty there, but yeah.
Yeah, I just realized. So thy weapon, again, I'm using the KJV here because the NIV is like a bit sketchy. The Hebrew, it's aznecha. It's an interesting word. Derived from the root azen, and it is a hapax. The Targums and Tzaddik Gaon, followed by Rashi and Ibn Ezra, read your weapon based on the word zain, which refers to weapons in Mishnaic Hebrew. The Septuagint reads your belt, the Vulgate your girdle. McCarthy writes that they may derive it from azal. Peshitta reads your armor.
Yeah, I think the idea is of saying to say that it means weapon is to just ignore the aleph at the beginning of the word, and then it becomes like zanecha, which is like your weapons, and it could also mean your penises, but that's a separate thing.
Yeah, in slang Hebrew,
your weapon
can mean dick.
Yes, exactly.
Kip Davis throws in but races were not understood in terms remotely similar to how we have come to view of them or think of them. And then Matt White says, Aaron, your hero and mine, Ozzy Osbourne, got arrested for pissing on the Alamo while wearing his wife's dress. Yes, I remember. The story was that he was drunk, so Sharon hid all of his clothes so he couldn't leave. So he just grabbed some of her clothes and left, and then he pissed on what he thought was an old building, and they got kicked out of Texas for a year or longer, I think.
And the judge was like, I don't believe you. You wouldn't consider that old.
In Texas?
Well, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
saying to him.
there's not a lot of consideration. And then let's see. Kip Davis adds says, I might have a PDF copy of it here somewhere. It was in a volume I edited, The War Scroll, Violence, War, and Peace in the Dead Sea Scrolls and Related Literature by Brill in 2015.
Oh my God, Brill. Okay, so that means it's incredibly expensive if we don't get the PDF spread.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it comes to
$40
Brill,
bucks.
yeah, there is a book about alchemy, Summa Fictionis by Pseudogeber, and it costs like $600.
Yeah, everything from Brill is just incredibly expensive. They have like some of the best publications, like honestly, like
Yeah.
from the couple books that I do have from Brill, they are phenomenal. But everything is behind this massive paywall.
Yeah, I mean, I could have access to some of the books through my university, but yeah, I don't understand why it's so expensive.
Kip said it's 250.
Must be branding.
Oof.
Yeah, see, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Okay, let's get to the exciting bit.
Continue.
Yeah, but I see another comment from Kip.
Oh.
Okay. And then Ozzy had shot someone at the Alamo. If Ozzy had shot someone at the Alamo, would he have been kicked out? I think that's less likely.
Was he wearing a dress at the time?
He was wearing a dress at the time, and you can get arrested for that now.
Ooh, okay. I got to stay out of Texas and Florida. Shit. My travel's getting really restricted.
Okay, so on verse 14, which is 15, the Lord your God moves about in your camp. Lundbom comments, this is another indication that the present law is promulgated against a holy background. Here is a very anthropomorphic view of Yahweh God, in which he is perceived as touring the camp and not wanting to look upon anything indecent. Nowhere else in Deuteronomy is Yahweh so portrayed. The D source, a Deuteronomic source, generally has Yahweh's dwelling place in heaven, according to von Rad. Anthropomorphisms, such as the present one, are common in the J source, as in Genesis 3, verses 8 to 24, 18, verses 20 to 33. Although they do occur elsewhere in 2 Samuel 7, 6 to 7, and Numbers 5, 3. Here, in his walk through the camp, Yahweh must not see anything indecent, the reason being that his presence is, quote, is irreconcilable with uncleanliness, end quote, according to Daube.
He's less powerful than Superman in this verse. He can't even see through a little bit of earth on top of the poo.
Yeah, exactly. So anything indecent, the Hebrew it's elvat davar, literally the nakedness of a thing. Ibn Ezra writes this refers to anything, quote, in deed or speech, end quote. Nelson writes that the term refers broadly to a shameful matter or behavior and is associated with sexuality through the notion of nakedness, quote unquote. On verse 15, which is 16, most commentators agree that this verse refers to a slave who fled from a foreign country into Israel, based on verse 16, 17 in the Testament, in the Hebrew Bible, which states, he shall live with you. Although Philo in verses 1 to 4 wrote that this refers to an Israelite slave. And Lundbom comments, the law in any case is remarkable, having no equivalent in slave legislation of the ancient Near East. Isaac Mendelssohn, however, does note a possible parallel in the Code of Hammurabi, section 280, where a native Babylonian slave who was sold into a foreign country had fled from there was, upon his return home, set free. Runaway slaves were common in the ancient world, as we learn both from the Bible in Genesis 16:6, 1 Samuel 25:10, and 1 Kings 2 verses 39 to 40. And surviving Babylonian documents. The Code of Hammurabi contains a set of laws pertaining to fugitive slaves, 15 through 20, where anyone caught aiding their flight or harboring them becomes guilty of a capital offense. Both are counted as theft. Those returning slaves to their owners get a reward.
So when Paul sent Onesimus back to his owner in direct violation of this commandment, he was actually operating under the Code of Hammurabi and expecting a reward, perhaps.
Well, if the tradition is if he understood it to mean this only refers to foreign slaves that have come back, maybe they're Israelites that have escaped from foreign lands, or any slave from a foreign land is different. But because was it a Roman that he sent a slave back to? I don't know the story.
I'm not sure off the top of my head. I don't know if it even mentions it. He just refers to Onesimus's master as a friend.
But that maybe it was like, that was a local, like.
Okay, so on verse 17, which is 18, shrine prostitute. The Hebrew it's kadesh for male and kadesha for females. The word is derived from kuf dalet shin, holy or sacred, kadesh. There is a significant debate amongst scholars if kadesha does refer to a woman dedicated to sacred prostitution. Lundbom writes that cultic prostitution is widely believed to have flourished in the ancient world, being particularly indigenous to Canaanite and Phoenician cults, and is attested by classical authors such as Herodotus in Histories 1:199 and Strabo in Geography 12:336. He notes, however, that hard evidence for cultic prostitution in Egyptian, Assyrian, Neo-Babylonian, and Ugaritic texts is either ambiguous or lacking altogether. It has been argued that the Akkadian cognate kadishtu refers to a sacred prostitute. However, it is not widely accepted. Tigay, for example, writes that the kadishtu's role was to sing in the temple, as well as roles outside the temple, and there is no indication that any of these roles involved sexual activity. Nelson writes that it is unlikely that anything like cult prostitution was practiced in Israel, and the linkage between Kadesha with such an institution is unproven. As for the male term Kadesh, Tigay notes that in the Book of Kings, it is used to refer to a type of abhorrent pagan cultic functionary, mentioned on par with high places, sacred pillars, and sacred posts, and is associated with the goddess Asherah. In Ugaritic, it refers to cultic personnel lower than priests. He writes, however, that it is unclear whether Kadesh has the same meaning in the Bible. He proposed that Kadesh refers to a male who practices prostitution, either heterosexual, or homosexual, according to Talmud Sanhedrin 54b, and not a pagan official. Lundbom thinks that Kadesh refers to a practicing homosexual associated directly or indirectly with temple worship. Nelson, however, suggested that Kadesh refers to cult functionaries, most likely in connection with the worship of Yahweh.
So no,
it's not possible that it just. Sorry. Is it not possible that it just means then, like the same as the Assyrian, that it's just it doesn't have anything to do with prostitution? It just means a cultic. What was the word? Someone who worked in the temple that wasn't a priest, like a lower level.
I mean, it could be. It's not. I don't think it's entirely clear.
I'm saying like none of the scholars or whatever that you mentioned they were like, oh, it's either just prostitute without any cultic connection, or it might be a combination. But no one said it could be just a cultic practitioner or whatever.
Yeah.
And then
maybe it's
Eric
just the context. Yeah.
Eric Wander comments and says, question, may a eunuch enter into the congregation of the Lord? In Isaiah 56, they were able to do so. Was Isaiah written first and then Deuteronomy, or this law's not mattered anymore?
So Isaiah 56, I forget if that's Deutero-Isaiah or Trito-Isaiah, because Isaiah was written in 3 parts. So I forget which one that falls into, but if this is like a core that we're talking about here in these laws, then I mean the context is also kind of different there too, right? Because they're talking about like the coming end times, the eschaton. So it's not like the exact same end times as Christianity has, but it's the same idea, that there will be like a day of judgment, right? So I think for that it might be if I am remembering properly, it might be like a salvation thing. So it'll be kind of in this new, because one of the big differences between Christianity and Judaism in terms of their eschatology is that in Christianity there will be no new temple, but in Jewish thought there would be a new temple. There would be a new heaven, a new earth, a new temple. But Christian theology doesn't have the new temple. So this might be an issue of being in this new heavenly one. But I have to go back and read Isaiah 56. But I think the context is a little bit different, and I forget if that falls into Deuteronomy or true to Isaiah.
And then Matt White says,
wait, just a second.
Wait.
Jacques Poulimer said, if a eunuch enters the congregation, that takes a lot of balls. I like that comment.
Shut up.
Matt White says, panel, can we assume that those who wrote these laws already knew the code and laws of Hammurabi?
I mean, some of them, and not necessarily all of them. There are plenty of similarities, but the thing is, the Code of Hammurabi is like those laws were like everywhere in the ancient Near East. So while the laws of Hammurabi were written way, way earlier, the stuff that this was probably building off of probably came afterwards, but it's still very much related to the laws of Hammurabi.
Yeah, you find similarities in other like ancient Near Eastern codes, like Hittite law, Middle Syrian law, Shnuna laws, etc., etc. So it's not.
Yeah, I would imagine that
it's
would
not
have
just Hammurabi.
Yeah, I would imagine that they would have been passed down through the culture, but the specific writers wouldn't necessarily have known that it came from this guy called Hammurabi. They might not have known who he was.
Would it be fair to say that perhaps they did, at the very least, become acquainted with the Hammurabi Code while in exile in Babylon?
Yeah, totally. That's possible. Yeah.
Okay. So on 18, which is 19, hire of a whore. I'm using the KJV here. The Hebrew it's etenan zonah. The word zonah is the more common term for a prostitute. The phrase appears in Micah 1:7, Isaiah 23:17, and Ezekiel 16:34. Lundbom writes that etanan zonah is dirty money, quote unquote, that Yahweh will not accept in payment for a vow. Rashi reads, if he gave her a lamb as her harlot's fee, it is disqualified as sacrificial offering. And Tigay asks why prostitute was singled out if income from other immoral sources, such as theft, was also offensive. He writes, temples, with their throngs of festive travelers, must have been particularly attractive hangouts for prostitutes, hoping to attract business from worshippers who were carried away by the festive mood of the holiday. This situation is reflected in Hosea 4:14, which criticizes worshippers who cavort with prostitutes. It is easy to imagine prostitutes who apply their trade near temples vowing part of their income to the temple in return for success. Indeed, Micah 1, I accidentally put an at it. I should check what verse is it. It states that the idols of Samaria were, quote, amassed from fees for harlotry, end quote. Later Greek and Roman sources mention gifts given to temples by courtesans. The present law, then, is based on revulsion at such perversion of sacred occasions. And I think it's Micah 1:7. I need to check real quick.
Man, some of those minor prophets, I swear, like if you read through them as we will, they start to sound just all the same. Honestly, like the smaller ones are all like doom and gloom. That's it. That's the whole point of them.
Yeah, Micah 1:7. Yeah, okay. So on the same verse, the price of a dog. Again, I'm using the KJV here. In Hebrew, it's mechir kelev. Several commentators like Gersonides, Abravanel, Lundbom, and Cohen-Zemach understood kelev as a euphemism for a male prostitute, based on the parallel with zonah. Some wrote that this refers to male homosexual prostitutes, and Tigay thinks that it may denote a homosexual who performs in the stance of a dog. Dog is yeah. Nelson, however, writes that there is no ancient Near Eastern text which suggests that dog could mean male prostitute. The word mechir refers to a price in exchange for or equivalent value rather than wages. According to halacha, the phrase means that the price received for selling a dog may not be given to the temple. Since dogs are detested in the Bible, as seen in 1 Samuel 24:14, 2 Samuel 3:8, and Ecclesiastes 9:4, as the source of a gift to the temple, even indirectly, they were objectionable. Nelson writes that dog could refer to a devoted follower, quote unquote, in the service of a pagan god, as seen in the Lachish Ostracon 2, but Lundbom rejects this view.
Yeah, I feel like that one's really unlikely because dogs were viewed very poorly in the ancient Near East. Like they in Persian culture, if you got old, they would just like send you out to the wilderness to get eaten by dogs. Like they were just like these they were seen as
Rude.
these dirty scavengers, right? So yeah, it's just unlikely that it would be seen in any good way in the ancient Near East.
Yeah, I went to visit the Ashmolean Museum yesterday and went to the Egyptian. They have quite a nice Egyptian collection there. There's quite a few cat-headed goddesses there, so I think very much they were cat people. Not big fans of dogs. So, I mean, there's a couple of jackals, but I guess it's slightly different.
I wonder if the idea of
Um,
burying their excrement has something to do with the fact that cats do that and dogs don't do that.
Maybe.
All right.
I mean,
And
I don't know
then-
what cat and dog culture was like in the Near East.
And then Kip Davis says it is also possible that the somebody help me pronounce that.
Kedeshim.
Kedeshim were polemicized in Deuteronomy as part of other cult retinue, implicating them in sexual rituals without this ever actually being the case.
Yeah, that's totally possible. But either way, the image that we get from them is that they are called prostitutes.
Yeah, I see from the context because of, the next line is it uses the language Zonan not rather than Kadesh, so that would make sense that with the context that it is talking about prostitution, and it could be a polemic against those Kadashtu or whatever.
I've also read about an interesting enterprise that was also within that same ancient Near Eastern context, where you have like these matriarchal ran communities that would be located sort of like in between two major travel points that was often frequented by merchants who would stay the night and have sex with prostitutes and do business. And these places were full of these prostitutes, all run by a matriarch, and they were places of major affluence and kind of interesting enterprise back in the day that perhaps maybe this is speaking against that sort of thing playing any role within the worship of our God in our temple. Like we don't want nothing to do with that, and but just thought it was interesting.
Yeah, I think people used to go there for their really good soup.
That too.
Sure. Like, it was godly, the broth there, broth L.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Well, that was a bit of a stretch. Sorry.
Come on, Isaac. You're better than this. Okay, so verse 19, which is 20, we find two other laws which prohibit usury. Exodus 22:25, which is 24, and Leviticus 25, verses 35 to 37. Lundbom writes that the reasoning of both is to provide relief for a fellow Israelite who has become poor or needy. The law in Deuteronomy doesn't state the economic status of the borrower and extends the law to any Israelite. He writes, however, that Deuteronomy and the Old Testament in general are much concerned over the plight of the poor and about reducing the gulf between rich and poor, and we may assume it to be a consideration here. On verse 20, which is 21, you may charge a foreigner interest. Tigay comments, this exception is similar to 15.3, which exempts loans to foreigners from remission. As Lutzato notes, the foreigner is normally a businessman visiting the country for purposes of trade, and he borrows in order to invest in merchandise and make a profit, not to survive poverty. This is there is no moral imperative to remit loans made for such purposes or forego interest on them. Furthermore, assuming the risk of lending and making the sacrifice that remission and interest-free loans entail are special obligations toward one's countrymen, Hebrew achim, literally brothers, and for the sake of maintaining equilibrium in Israelite society. The law does not require assuming the same risk and sacrifice toward others who do not share the same obligation. On verses 21 to 23, which is 22 to 24, Nelson comments, the word vow provides a catchword connection to verse 18, which is 19. A vow was a sacrifice or gift promised when petitioning the deity for help. As a promise of a future expression of gratitude and as a gift, it was intended to establish and strengthen one's relationship with the divine, as seen in 12:6 and Numbers 33. These verses sound more like a wisdom saying than a law. Ecclesiastes 5 verses 3 to 5, which is 46 in the Old Testament, offers similar advice on avoiding vows. The motivation of verse 21, which is 22, is typical of Deuteronomy. Yahweh will require, quote unquote, it, and it would be a sin, quote unquote. And finally, on 24, which is 25, Chazal in Talmud Bava Metzia 87b and 92a, Targums and Rashi, understood this verse as referring to workers who are harvesting the field or vineyard of the owner. From the plain reading, this law applies to any passerby. According to Josephus, Antiquities 4, 234 to 237, Isi ben Yehuda in Talmud Bava Metzia 92a, Matthew 12:1, Mark 2:23, and Luke 6:1. Lundbom writes that in antiquity, people commonly passed through the fields and vineyards of others, and this was not considered a trespass. When passing through an unharvested vineyard, one is not permitted to take any grapes away with him, since it'll be considered as theft. He writes that the law allows for hospitality, but at the same time protects the owner from abuse of the privilege.
I feel like
And
this is a practical law here in the UK because we have like a lot of what's the word, right to roam sort of freedoms. In Scotland, you can just go wherever you want. There's no such thing as trespassing, really. And then the rest of the UK, it's kind of there are certain you don't have a right to roam, but you have historical. I don't know what the word is. Right of ways. And even if you own a field, if there is a right of way in that field, you may not obstruct people from using it, and they're protected for, and you have to look after them. So I'm almost sure it's a practical thing. Like if you were to go into a field or passing through a field, you're allowed to take stuff from. You can't get in trouble for taking stuff from from eating something while you're there, but to take anything out with you would be considered theft. And I wonder if this was written by a priest because they can't own land anyway. So.
I will move into 24.
Yep.
It's funny that the priest isn't allowed to own land, yet they have all the biggest houses.
Neat trick, huh?
Well, yeah. I mean,
Neat.
I think they're even. Are they? Does the Bible let them have like property for houses at all? Are they allowed to own? I think they're allowed to own property.
I think the Levites are given like some cities. They have
right.
cities
I think they
of their
just can't
own,
have
right?
agricultural land at all, and maybe they're not allowed to rent. I don't remember, something like that.
Well, I'll be happy to move to 24.
Yeah,
right,
sure.
if we're ready. All right. Yeah. Suppose a man enters into marriage with a woman, but she does not please him because he finds something objectionable about her. So he writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out of his house. And then she leaves his house and goes off to become another man's wife. Then suppose the second man dislikes her, writes a bill of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out of his house, or the second man who married her dies. Her first husband, who sent her away, is not permitted to take her again to be his wife after she has been defiled, for that would be abhorrent to the Lord. And you shall not bring guilt on the man on the land that the Lord your God has given you as a possession.
What?
I guess we'll wait to discuss that one. I'm already confused. When a man is newly married, he shall not go out of the army to be charged with any related duty. He shall be free at home for 1 year to be happy with the wife whom he has married. No one shall take a mill or an upper millstone in pledge. It should be taking... Now, hold on a second. I can't let go of my hand so I can scroll this. All right, so when a man is newly married, he shall not go out of the army to be charged with any related duty. He shall be free at home for 1 year to be happy with the wife with whom he is married. No one shall take a mill or an upper millstone in pledge, for that would be taking a life in pledge. If someone is caught kidnapping another Israelite, enslaving or selling an Israelite, then that kidnapper shall die. So you shall purge the evil from your midst. Guard against an outbreak of the leprous or a leprous skin disease from being very careful. You shall carefully observe whatever the Levitical priests instruct you, just as I have commanded them. Remember that the Lord your God remember what the Lord your God did to Miriam on your journey out of Egypt.
Deep cuts.
And when you make your neighbor a loan of any kind, you shall not go out of the house to take a pledge. You shall not go into the house to take a pledge. You shall wait outside while the person to whom you are making the loan brings the pledge out to you. If the person is poor, you shall not sleep in the garment given you as the pledge. You shall give the pledge back by you shall give the pledge back by sunset, so that your neighbor may sleep in the cloak and bless you, and it will be to your credit before the Lord your God. You shall not withhold the wages of poor and needy laborers, whether other Israelites or aliens who reside in your land or in one of your towns. You shall pay them their wages daily before sunset, because they are poor and their livelihood depends on them. Otherwise, they might cry out to the Lord against you, and you would incur guilt. Parents shall not put to death for their children, nor their children shall be put to death for their parents, only for their own crimes may persons be put to death.
That's helpful.
You shall not deprive a resident alien or an orphan of justice. You shall not take a widow's garment in pledge. Remember that if you were a slave in Egypt and the Lord your God redeemed you from there, therefore I command you to do this. When you reap your harvest in your field and forget a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back to get it. It shall be left for the alien, the orphan, and the widow, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all your undertakings. When you beat your olive trees, do not strip what is left. It shall be for the alien, the orphan, and the widow. When you gather the grapes in your vineyard, do not glean what is left. It shall be for the alien, the orphan, and the widow. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I am commanding you to do this.
These seem related.
Yeah. So they don't have a lot of welfare systems for aliens, orphans, and widows. I'm feeling particularly bad about the orphans and widows. They just have
they're like a typical. They're a typical like. There's a typical list that lists all the poor and needy, and this includes the orphan and the widow.
Yeah.
Social safety net is maybe there will be an olive left on the tree, perhaps.
Yes. For the little old lady to go find.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'll start on verse 1. Becomes displeasing to him. Mishnah Gittin 9:10 features a debate between the house of Shammai and the house of Hillel regarding when a man can divorce his wife. The house of Shammai wrote that he divorces her in the case of adultery, as seen in the phrase arvat davar, a thing of nakedness, which implies forbidden sexual relations. The house of Hillel wrote that he may divorce her for a minor issue, such as, quote, spoiling his dish, end quote, based on becomes displeasing to him.
You burn my toast, you're out.
You better
Exactly. Yeah. Rabbi Akiva there says that a man can divorce his wife even if he found another woman who is better looking than her. Yeah. The interpretation of the house of Hillel was accepted by Josephus in Antiquities 4253. And Lundbom writes, neither view is of much help here, particularly the view of Shammai, since the woman is legally divorced and legally remarried. She is not stoned. As for the view of Hillel, the wife's spoiling of her husband's food would trivialize the law, the same as the husband's finding another woman more beautiful. It is thus agreed that while the indecency must be something less than adultery, it has to be something improper or indecent. Because the expression means a naked thing, immodest exposure or immodest behavior has been suggested. Sirach 25, verses 25 to 26, recommends the divorce of an evil wife who speaks boldly and is disobedient. Compare Mishnah Ketubot 7:6. We really do not know what sort of indecency is envisioned. Rashi simply concludes that the woman is wicked.
Those damn disobedient wives.
Ooh,
Indeed.
wicked
I'll tell
woman.
you what.
Yeah.
So where does the idea come that you can't divorce her at all come from?
I don't know.
Isn't that like a isn't it, I don't know if it's a Catholic thing only or whatever. Isn't there like a Christian thing or like divorce is bad?
Well,
this
law
In the Catholic
well
Church,
Yes.
it's pretty frowned upon, I think.
But like wasn't like
Yeah,
Henry
London-
VIII's big thing against the church was that they didn't let him
Yeah.
divorce.
Yeah, so he was like, "Oh, we gotta get something new then, huh?"
Because he wanted to marry someone else or something.
Yeah,
Yeah, because his first wife wouldn't give birth to a son.
Yeah, I mean, the Old
Yeah.
Testament doesn't really have a law on divorce. That's what Lundbom writes. It doesn't have a law on divorce, just as it has no law on marriage. Although here again, Tobit 7:13 states that marriage had to be carried out according to the law of Moses. It could well be that marriage and divorce in ancient Israel were regulated largely by custom. The Old Testament elsewhere assumes the existence of divorce, like Leviticus 21:7, 14, 22:13, Numbers 30:10. And Jewish tradition, with few exceptions, has always allowed it.
It also amazes me that somebody could think that, oh, well, this woman is defective. She can only give birth to girls.
Well, I mean, he was king and he needed an heir.
But it's
And
a
I think they
stunning
didn't
level
have-
of stupidity.
Yeah, but
It's not like
Yeah.
replacing the woman changes this.
the monarchy is a stunning level of stupidity.
Yeah.
My favorite part about the whole thing is he got his comeuppance because despite all of that, it ended up being a daughter who was his inheritor.
Yeah. Well, he had two of his daughters were queen after him.
Yeah.
Oh, and I also like I've seen a comment by Ambrose. I think it wasn't him. Where is it? Yeah, it's actually Augustine who the title is "The Law Requires a Man to Proceed Slowly if he wants to divorce his wife."
I like that you can also just write a certificate of divorce and hand it to her. That's the whole thing, not the many thousands of dollars that are involved in the months or years here in Texas to do a divorce proceeding. All of that shit. Yeah, no.
Yeah, and the thing is, though, these had more use than just like from marriages. Like they would sometimes even divorce demons. Like if they thought there were demons in the house, they would write them a certificate of divorce.
Now, all of this assuming the person could write.
That's
Yeah. And speaking of a certificate of divorce, the Hebrew here it's Sefer Kritut, literally a book of severance. Today, this is known as get, which according to Tigay is Aramaic for legal document, from a Sumerian term meaning oblong tablet, interestingly enough. He further writes, since sever, in Hebrew karat, is not the verb used for divorce in the Bible, it has been conjectured that the term did not originally refer to the severance of the marriage, but to the act of cutting the wife's hem or garment, which is the ceremonial act of divorce known from Mesopotamia. Since karat is used in the Bible for cutting off the hem of a garment, as in 1 Samuel 24, verses 4, 5, and 11, This suggestion is plausible. To judge from various ancient Near Eastern documents referring to divorce, the certificate was probably a statement by the husband that the couple is no longer husband and wife, as in Hosea 2:4, which is quoted in Karaite divorce certificates, and that she is free to marry whomever she wishes. The latter provision is what the Mishnah terms, quote, the essential clause, end quote, of the divorce certificate in Gittin 9:3. Its purpose being to provide the wife with proof of her freedom to remarry.
Mm-hmm.
And all this reminds me of Steve Martin's description of how to get a divorce in his home country. You say, I break with thee, and then you throw dog poop on her shoes.
On verse 2, and if after she leaves his house. This phrase is omitted from the Septuagint and 4Q Deuteronomy A. McCarthy writes that this is a case of homo eo teleuton, since verse 1 also ends with his house, in Hebrew mi beito.
Okay. What's
and
the
I noticed
expression?
Yeah, I'm seeing comments. So Matthew K offers $5 and says, much love to you, Aaron, the panel, Peter, and the chat guest, Dr. Kill, which I'm sure means Dr. Kip. Also the rest of the chat friends. Then Jasa says, doesn't that go against a commandment of respect your parent or die or something like that? And I'm sure that's referring to the thing about you can't punish your children, or you can't kill your children for the crimes of your parents.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And then Eric Wander says, Luke 16:18. Anyone who divorces his wife and marries another woman commits adultery, and the man who remarries a divorced woman commits adultery. Luke's author doesn't like divorces. And that would seem to be a contradiction, but there are no contradictions in the Bible as long as you ignore all the contradictions.
Well, I mean, it's not just that. I think Paul especially was against divorces, if I'm remembering properly. But
He was an incel, so
yeah, right. There was the part in Luke, though, it seems like the remarriage is the issue. It's not necessarily married a divorced woman. Yeah, so it seems like the remarriage is the issue, not the divorce itself, from that verse at least. But I think in Paul you get a lot of that anti-divorce stuff.
I mean, that still goes against. Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
I have a comment by Lundbom about in the New Testament. So he writes, in the New Testament, the Pharisees ask Jesus if one may divorce his wife for any cause. And in Matthew 19, verses 3-9, Jesus comes out on the side of Shammai, saying that only for unchastity can a man divorce his wife and marry another. Compare also Matthew 5:31-32. Mark 10, verses 2-12 records the same debate, but with the difference that the disciples are told afterwards that a man who divorces his wife in order to marry another commits adultery, and that a woman who divorces her husband in order to marry another commits adultery. But here too, as in Luke 16:18, Jesus may simply have a particular situation in mind. Yeah. I noticed that Aaron had difficulty regarding verse 3. The JPS reads, then this latter man rejects her, writes her a bill of divorcement, hands it to her, and sends her away from his house, or the man who married her last dies. Or was it verse 4 which was confusing?
Yeah, probably the bit about defiling.
Yeah. Then the first husband who divorced her shall not take her to wife again, since she has been defiled, i.e. disqualified for him. So I have a comment.
Okay, so how does that work? The first husband did not defile her for the second husband, but the second husband defiled her for returning to the first one.
I think it is.
I think
kind of referring to the being defiled through divorce, but maybe not, because why would they have to specify that she was remarried?
Yeah, I have a comment by Lundbom about after she had been defiled. The Hebrew is acharei asher hutma'a. And Lundbom notes the opinion of Driver that acharei asher is a conjunction meaning after that, as seen in the KJV. He further writes, The woman's defilement is taken for granted, and although this defilement figures in her not being able to return to her first husband, it is not a reason for promulgating the law. The main reason is given in the key clause following, because that would be an abomination before Yahweh. Another reason is spoken directly to the people, and you shall not make the land guilty, quote unquote. Uncleanness commonly refers to sexual defilement, as seen in Genesis 34:5, 13:27, Leviticus 18:20, Numbers 5:13-14, and 20. And it appears that the woman will become unclean to her former husband by virtue of her sexual union with the latter. G.A. Smith says, quote, "It cannot be a matter of indifference to him that she had been another's, as presumably the popular humor took it. Such easy passage of a woman from another man to another did defile her," end quote. It seems then that such a remarriage is in fact being likened to adultery.
Oh, okay. So like someone who divorces a woman, and I guess is not so serious about it that he would remarry her again. Is maybe that's the idea. It's like
hold on. So because she does not please him, so if she remained celibate during that time, and he gets a divorce because of that, and then she remarries, then maybe she has sex with that guy, and now the original dude can't remarry her because she had sex.
I'm going to need some alternate interpretation on that, because if it was never, if the marriage was never consummated, it never existed, right?
No, I'm pretty sure it still would have existed.
like, oh, you trying? She wouldn't be a virgin if she was like if she's married. No.
I mean, is that explicit in the text though? That the marriage is not consummated?
Well, I mean, the Bible says that whoever you cleave into becomes your wife, right? So I mean, the marriage doesn't exist until it's consummated.
But I think you still need to give a divorce for that, though. So it's still possible.
You wouldn't have to give a divorce for that if there.
Yeah, it wouldn't.
No.
No, I think you would.
You don't cleave into.
I think you still need to divorce a woman that you've been betrothed to. Because back then it was like these two separate things. Nowadays it would be on the same day, so it's kind of marriage is marriage. But I think it would be considered adultery to have sex with a betrothed woman who has not been consummated yet. And I think that's come up before, hasn't it?
Kind of like Mary.
Okay. On verse 5, this law complements the rule in 27. Tigay writes that it appears here and not in chapter 20 because it is concerned with the bride rather than the soldier. He notes that according to the halakha, this law doesn't apply in the case of an obligatory war. This view is supported in an Ugaritic legend in which even those normally exempt from war, like the blind and sick, are mobilized for an urgent military campaign, including new husbands.
I was wondering about the language used in this verse, right? So when Aaron read it, it said to be happy with his wife. The NIV, I think it's the NIV says to bring happiness to his wife. I don't know what the Hebrew says.
The wife.
Is that what the Hebrew says?
No, the Hebrew reads "Vesimach et ishto," meaning and he brought happiness, perhaps his wife brought happiness to his wife, or something like this. And the Samaritan text, Voget, Peshitta, and Targums Jonathan understood the word "et" as a preposition, and so they read, "And may he rejoice with his wife." Nelson writes that this refers to sexual activity, as in Proverbs 5:19, and to delight in a more general sense, as in Ecclesiastes 9:9.
Because there is at least in Jewish tradition, there is this idea that a man has an obligation to kind of please his wife, at least to a certain extent. And I was wondering if that language difference between these translations, which one was more accurate, but I see that it's ambiguous.
No, I don't think it's simach. It's not really it's not really contested. I think the only thing that is contested is the et
Yeah. Because a lot of verbs in Hebrew can use the et to mean, what you would translate it into English as to. So it's possible to mean please to, like pleasing her, as opposed to pleasing with her. Right?
Yeah.
Oh,
although
whatever.
although Lundbom reads, and he shall be very glad with his wife. Reading Vesimach with a final chaf as an internal pl. Oh, I think it's wrong. It's a chet, but it's a typo, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So on verse 6, a pair of millstones. The Hebrew it's rechaim varachev. Weinfeld writes that the rechaim were made of two stones that were put atop each other. The lower one was an elongated, thick, heavy, and flat at the top, and the rechav was flat at the bottom and vaulted at the top for gripping above the ground. Wait, sorry.
No, you just went very choppy, so we didn't really get that.
Yeah.
Oh, you want me to repeat that?
Yeah, go again.
Okay. Weinfeld writes that the rechaim were made of two stones that were put atop each other. The lower one was an elongated, thick, heavy, and flat at the top, and the upper one, the rachav, was flat at the bottom and vaulted at the top for gripping and moving it back and forth above the grounded material. He writes that such millstones were common household objects, and their abundance in archaeological excavations reveals their necessity. Ibn Ezra notes that the deniers, quote-unquote, i.e. Karaites, interpreted its verse as a prohibition to abstain from sex. Based on Job 31:10, may my wife grind for another.
What?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, let her labor for someone else.
But there's no connection in this verse to anything.
The verb is grind?
Grind.
Yeah, like a millstone, like because they would have to.
Yeah, it's grinding.
They have to.
Well, now I'm disappointed.
You were thinking of something different.
I was thinking of a stripper move.
Of course you did.
No, your way is better. I agree.
Yeah, you make that white stuff from the seeds. It's grinding.
Yeah.
No.
We're not talking about where the white stuff comes from.
Yeah. It sounds like a sort of hand mill, like you just kind of do it with your
hand
hand.
mill. Yeah,
you got to do it with your hand.
That's exactly where the white stuff comes from.
Oh no!
Oh wow!
We're all gonna get kicked out of the camp.
Daniel Gable says, wasn't it that if the husband divorced, he could never take his former wife back? Yeah, that is what we're discussing, of why that is.
Yeah.
And then Trevor and Wright says the laws that are mentioned in Deuteronomy 23 applies only to Israelites and not Gentiles. And if so, why?
Most of the laws, I'd say all of the laws, only apply to Israelites. This book was written for Israelites. Yahweh doesn't care about anyone else. That's what it seems to be.
And notice the strong connection with the obedience or the disobedience of the laws and how it impacts the land as well.
Yeah.
And then Kip throws in a comment and says, "Come on, use your imagination, people." I don't know what he's referring to, but I'll use
millstone.
Yeah, maybe.
Grinding millstones.
There are a lot of options in the last few minutes.
Yeah,
I'm just amazed that Isaac even made the hand motion and didn't catch what he was doing.
I was like going pretty advanced, like the circular motion, like.
I thought he was doing it on purpose.
No.
No,
Okay.
Yeah, I'm saying like most people when they think of a millstone, they're probably thinking of one that's like a lot larger with like maybe
we weren't
like a big
thinking
stick
of
sticking out that you
like at all.
And that's how they
Grinding
made
this way.
flour, right?
Yeah.
You made flour, so then you could put the bun in the oven.
Yeah, all mills. Well, I don't know all mills, but like up until some point, all mills were made up of.
Are we talking about specific mills or general mills? I'm sorry.
Diploma mills. We should actually get Kent to
the idea of all mills would have a bottom bit. Well, you can think of a pestle and mortar as being the most basic type of mill, and then the more advanced mills are, let's have a really heavy stone, maybe with a bit of grooves underneath, and then you kind of using the friction of the movement above, you would grind the seeds, and then they were like, oh, we can do it circular, it's much easier. And then they were like, oh, let's attach this thing to a big stick and have a donkey pull it or whatever. And then you had big old mills with a donkey
Water
pulling it around. And then they were
wheels.
like, let's harness the power of water. And you had water
And the
mills, and then
power
you
of
got
music.
windmills. That's what that's the the windmills.
Yeah, being a miller was a great profession back in the day. It was up there with blacksmith and farrier and so forth. But, the blacksmith has to literally beat on hot iron all day long. The miller just has to watch the donkey go around and around.
Well,
I would be a cobbler.
you just have to carry stuff, I guess.
Well,
Okay, so on
Yeah.
verse 7, sorry.
Yeah, I'll just say, like, verse
Okay.
6 is taken as a general statement. You shouldn't, if you're lending someone money, do not take a pidyon, a pledge item, anything that the person needs for their livelihood.
Yeah, as Rashi says, if one comes to demand a pledge through the court for his debt, he should not take as a pledge anything by which food is prepared. That's the halacha.
Yeah.
Okay, so on verse 7, kidnapping a fellow Israelite. In the Hebrew Bible, it reads kidnapping a life, in Hebrew nefesh, from his brothers, from the Israelites. Ibn Ezra and Chizkuni wrote that the addition from the Israelites is necessary because the Edomites are called brothers. Nelson writes that this expression emphasizes that this crime is a sort of social murder, quote unquote, and a violation of Deuteronomy's brotherhood ethic. The law is a restatement of Exodus 21:16, which doesn't state the nationality of the kidnapped, nor does it use the term nefesh.
And by the way, this is not this. People like to bring this stuff up about saying that this is you see, slavery is forbidden by the Bible. Like, yeah, this is not saying you cannot kidnap someone and turn them into a slave, or that you cannot take slaves. This is saying you might not kidnap a free Israelite that does not belong to you. That's what it's saying. Yeah.
Okay, so on verse 9, this verse refers to the story in Numbers 12 verses 10 to 15. After Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses, Miriam was struck with leprosy and had to stay 7 days outside the camp. And Tigay comments, the purpose behind the mentioning of this incident is not clear. A traditional ethicizing interpretation, as seen in Sifrei Deuteronomy 275, Rashi and Ibn Ezra, takes this as a warning against the gossip, since that is why Miriam was stricken. But the text could hardly expect many readers to get the point of a warning in which the dangerous conduct is not explicitly defined. Many commentators, like Rashbam and Abravanel, believe that the point is to show that no one should receive a special treatment from the priests and be excused for the required isolation, since not even Miriam was excused. However, according to Milgram, Miriam did receive special treatment. She was isolated only a week instead of the normal 2. Furthermore, what the Lord did to Miriam, quote unquote, is most naturally understood as referring to the affliction itself, not the period of isolation that followed. So perhaps the point is to show that nobody is immune, so that people wouldn't assume it can't happen to me and fail to consult the priest regarding a potentially leprous skin disease. On verses 10 to 13, Tzipol comments, this section repeats the command in Exodus 22, verses 24 to 26, with additional annotation. The sentence, you must not enter his house. You lost me? All right.
No, you're still there. We can hear you.
Okay.
Did we lose everyone? It's very quiet all of a sudden.
Yeah?
I feel like maybe this is an issue on your part, Ember.
Perhaps.
Okay. Can he not hear us?
Yeah, maybe it's an issue with his connection.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep, it was me. Never mind.
Okay.
All right, I've got a question. I mean, we're coming. This is a question for the people in the chat room. We are going to be losing Tomer on Tuesday, so we'll be doing this upcoming Tuesday, but then we're not going to be doing a Tuesday show anymore. So
I'm starting my masters finally.
Yeah. So we're only going to be doing the Saturday show. But we did want to kind of pick up the pace a little bit, so we discussed maybe making the Saturday show a 3-hour show instead of a 2-hour show. I'd like to see some comments from the chat, because I'm pretty sure it's the same people that would be watching then as now. So what do you think about making a 3-hour show? And then I've also got a comment from Say10-616, says, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy are all semi-duplicated ancient legal stuff, as if people and not God inspired them. I wonder. Indeed, seems suspicious.
Yeah, I haven't finished my commentary. That's
Thank you. Got him to say it.
Yeah,
There it is.
Roll credits. I mean, wait.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So I'll read again. Verses 10 to 13. Sipol comments. This section repeats the command in Exodus 22, verses 24 to 26, with additional annotation. The sentence, "You must not enter his house to seize his pledge," in verse 10, is an annotation of "Do not act toward them as a creditor," in Exodus 22:24. Here and in Exodus, it refers to the common practice of taking the cloth as a pledge, in Hebrew, avot. Compare Proverbs 20:16. Chazal, in Talmud Bava Metzia 114b, decreed that what was said in Deuteronomy refers to night covering, and the loaner must return it in the evening during sunset. And Exodus talks about day covering and must be returned until sunset. And then the loaner can come back and take it.
Yeah.
On verse 14, Lundbom comments, a law forbidding oppression of a day laborer who is poor and needy, whether an Israelite or a sojourner. This is at least. A specific form of oppression is cited in the verse following. The Septuagint appears to anticipate the application in translating, quote, "You shall not wrongfully withhold wages of the poor and needy," end quote. But a Kennicott Hebrew manuscript and the Vulgate have wages, which is supported additionally by sochar in 1Q Deuteronomy B, instead of Masoretic text's sachir, hired laborer. A version of this same law appears in Leviticus 19:13, where it says that one is not to oppress one's neighbor or rob him. Hebrew ashak can mean both oppress and rob, seen Leviticus 5:21, which is 6:2 in the Old Testament, and Hosea 12:8, which is 7. The Leviticus law does not mention the sojourner, nor is the concern for the poor and needy made explicit. The prophets speak out in no uncertain terms against oppressing the poor and needy, as in Amos 4:1, Micah 2:2, Jeremiah 7:6, and Ezekiel 22:29. With Jeremiah making this a condition for Judites remaining in the land. Now, on verse 16, Nelson comments, there is a catchword connection to chet, sin, in verse 15. What is meant here, however, is a legal offense or crime, quote unquote, and not sin in the theological sense. This is a law of judicial procedure. Compare 17 verses 8 to 11, 19:15, and 25, 1-3. The thrice repeated passive formula denotes authorized formal execution. Putting family members of a malefactor to death could stem from notions of collective guilt or as the punishment of a vicarious substitute for the actual offender. In Deuteronomy, intergenerational collective responsibility does not apply in jurisprudence, although it is still assumed to operate in the wider realm of divine-human relationship, as in 5:9 and 7:10, end quote. Tigay writes that although Deuteronomy recognizes in 5:9 that God punishes descendants for the ancestors' wrongs, that is solely a divine prerogative. Human authorities may not act likewise.
Yep.
On verse 17, take the cloak of the widow as a pledge. Tigay comments, though other debtors' garments may be distrained and must be returned at night if necessary, those of a widow may not be taken at all. In this respect, the law shows greater solicitude for the widow than for aliens and orphans, about whom there is no such regulation.
Yes,
Perhaps
those orphans.
Perhaps she is protected from this final inconvenience and indignity out of respect for her age, her bereavement, and the difficulties she faces living, and perhaps raising children on her own. Compare 1 Kings 17:12 and 2 Kings 4:7. Tapu Suda Jonathan and Targum Pseudo Jonathan and halachic sources like Talmud Bava Metzia 115a and Sifrei Deuteronomy 281 think the reason is that if a creditor held her garment and returned it to her each evening, it could lead to unchastity or to rumors harmful to her reputation.
That's pretty funny. But yeah, I mean, orphans and widows were always like seen as the people that you had to protect the most in biblical literature.
Yeah, they always appear in the list, as well as the Levites. I think in Deuteronomy it's the Levites as well as others. I can remember because I think the foreigner, Yitom Ger Almana. Yeah, I think Yitom Ger Almana, foreigner, orphan, foreigner, and widow.
Yeah, and then throughout like all the prophetic works, it's like, make sure to always do this, do X, Y, and Z for the widows and the orphans, or protect the widows and the orphans, always stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay, so on verse 18, Nelson writes that the verse could be seen as a general motivation for the entire social Torah, quote unquote, that falls between the brackets formed by verses 8b and 9, verses 8b through 9 and verse 18. Israel's own experience with slavery is to be paradigmatic for its empathy for distressed groups. He writes that in Deuteronomy, the expression Yahweh redeemed you is a miniature creed with powerful social justice implications, as in 7:9, 9:26, 15:15, and 21:8. And finally, on verse 19, Lundbom comments, Leviticus 19:9 states that one must not harvest the corners of one's field, which, because of rounded sickles, was more difficult, but leave these for the gleaners. One must not glean one's own field. Gleaning was a constructive way of dealing with poverty. Neil M. Sauce calls it a make-work scheme, quote unquote, but sees it as another important mechanism in Old Testament law bearing upon the distribution of wealth. Ruth, as both a widow and a sojourner, was able to glean in the fields of Boaz in Ruth 2. The practice existed also in Egypt. Quote, the instruction of Amen em Ope, in chapter 28, contains a reference to someone coming upon a poor widow gleaning in the field. And that's it for my commentary.
Okay.
Yep.
And do we have any other comments on this?
I have one on the one that you put out earlier. So most people in chat, if not everyone, is for a 3-hour show. And since that will mean that I get a 50% raise, I'm for it as well.
Well, absolutely, yes.
Well played.
All our volunteers will get a 50% raise. And is everybody?
Man, I'd love a 50% raise. I love being still broke.
Join the Discord. I did want to say one last thing about this last section was that over here it's like, okay, you can't do gleaning where you like take the last bits and the last things that fall or whatever, and then we had somewhere else that says, leave the corners of your field. So I think there must be another place where it says something about like not picking up like your sheaves that have fallen off the back of the wagon or something like that. So because there's like maybe there's 3 different traditions, but because they're all in the Bible, the rabbis were like, yes, so if you're in a field, you have to leave a certain amount that you just don't cut, like quite a bit, like I don't know, 5% of your field, and then if you can't pick anything that falls down, and then once you've bundled everything up and you put them on your wagon, if you leave any behind, you can't go back for it. If it falls off the wagon, you can't go back for it. So in the end, you end up with quite a bit, and then they have to take off, what is it, 20% to give to the Levites and the priests or whatever. It's like, and then you've got the 7th year, and then there's the 7th year where you can't grow anything. So yeah, look, they really stunted their agricultural potential, I think.
Yeah. And then also wasn't the gleaning also prohibited during the Sabbath as well, right? I think that's kind of part of that.
Yeah, I think so, right. There's the whole thing in Exodus and Leviticus, and then I believe there's a section in Ruth that deals with it too.
Yeah, I've already commented on this. It's Ruth 2, I believe.
Yeah, all of those agricultural practices would have been like the basic things that you cannot do on the Sabbath. Like, so you can kind of put them into categories of like plowing, preparing the field, plowing, growing, watering, collecting all of that stuff. But then it's also like turning things into, all the way to cooking. So grinding, and then you've got like also there's a section to do with hunting and making leather, and then maybe building and setting and fire. Those are kind of all of the categories you can. I think that's all of it. Yeah. And it's all related to like the tabernacle and whatever.
On the subject of not harvesting the corners of your fields, it struck in my mind that modern agricultural practices involve a big robotic irrigation device that spins around a pivot in the center, so all the farm fields with them are circles now. So there are no corners.
Oh, I should note that Tigay writes, he notes that in halakhic exegesis inferred that there are 4 categories of what must be left for the poor. Pe'ah, the edges of the fields, vineyards, and groves to be left unreaped. Shichecha, what is forgotten in fields, vineyards, and groves. Leket and peret, grain and grapes that fall to the ground during reaping. And olelot, which is small, immature clusters of grapes.
Yeah, I imagine like modern, like the rabbis have figured out like modern agriculture, like you don't leave stuff in the field, you harvest everything and then you take a certain amount and you give it to charity. Probably.
That would be wiser, one would think.
All right, so is everyone good for Tuesday? This being our last Tuesday show.
Tuesday works.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think so.
All right, and Lawrence, what's the last thing we should tell the audience before we close out?
Oh yeah, definitely join the Discord and subscribe to Milwaukee Atheists, because I'm gonna be putting out some shorter videos, not just shorts. Like I hate the idea of shorts, and I hate that people have that short of an attention span. But apparently that's where the views are. So I'm making more of those. But I mean, I'm still going to be doing like all the big projects and stuff because they're way more fulfilling and way more useful. So I also want to concentrate on doing like shorter videos, like maybe around 10-ish minutes. So if you guys have ideas for topics that I can cover in that time, some pretty basic stuff, I would love to get to those.
Very good.
Because people's attention spans are too short.
And I'm right there with you. I don't like the whole thing about shorts, but at the same time, sometimes I just want to chill my brain down a bit before when I'm done working. I'm just going to go to bed. I just want to like watch stupid cat videos or whatever. Just and I can see watching these. Okay, well this is going to be less than a minute. I can handle less than a minute. But a lot of things. Well, it's 12 minutes. Who's got 12 whole minutes?
Yep.
Yeah, but then you spend more than 12 minutes going through the shorts.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah,
I have to
avoid the
clickbait. Discord. Dr. Kip joined the Discord, so yeah.
Oh, did he? About fucking time.
Yes, he did.
Fuck yeah. Everyone should join the Discord. That's where the memes live.
At the moment,
see, Lawrence.
At the moment, I'm having a bit of a.
Lawrence, that's why you pay me the big bucks, so I can put the link in here. See?
Yep, that's it. That's the reason.
Imagine Peter's getting paid twice for this show. Look at that.
At the moment, I'm ranting a bit about Deuteronomy 32. Which,
you should.
Oh my God!
You should talk to Chrissy about that. Chrissy has written a lot of stuff on Deuteronomy 32, and she has she has a lot of really good notes and a lot of really good commentary for it. So I'm
just spilling everything I can find there because it's such an interesting chapter.
It is, and I think maybe I should ask Chrissy if she wants to come on for that one, because she has amassed a huge amount of work on that chapter specifically. So I think that would be cool.
Yeah, I know that that she and I had a past issue, I guess, but that's not going to be an issue for me.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah,
I'll let her know that specifically. So
yeah, so she's welcome to be on. All right, so thank you much, everyone. See you on Tuesday.
Bye, everybody.
See you next Tuesday.
Thank you.